Not the kind of peace that comes from understanding. No, this was the peace of the grave. The peace that follows when the most dangerous predator is finally caged, exiled to the outer rim where civilized species need never again fear its terrible hunger for war. In the gleaming towers of Zephythus Prime, the Galactic Council convened as they had for centuries, their crystalline forms pulsing with the soft bioluminescence that marked their advanced evolution. The Zephythus had transcended physical violence eons ago, becoming beings of pure logic and calculated diplomacy. Around the crescent-shaped table, representatives from 47 species maintained the delicate balance that held their corner of the galaxy in harmony. All was as it should be, until the day the humans came home. Commander Jackson Rivers stood at the observation deck of the Prometheus, watching Earth grow larger through the reinforced transperisteel. After 3 centuries of exile, the blue marble of humanity's birth world looked different. Smaller, somehow, more fragile than the legends had described. "First time seeing her?" asked Captain Luna Voss, stepping up beside him. Her voice carried the weight of command and something else, a barely contained fury that had been building for 300 years. "My great-grandmother used to tell stories," Rivers replied, his augmented eyes automatically calculating orbital trajectories and defensive positions. The neural implants behind his temples pulsed softly, processing more data per second than entire Zephythus cities. "She said the oceans used to sing, they will again." The bridge crew of the Prometheus moved with the fluid precision of apex predators. Each human bore the marks of their 3-century evolution in the hostile depths of space: enhanced bone density, redundant organs, neural pathways rewired for combat efficiency. They had been forged in the fires of 1,000 alien worlds, tempered by endless war against creatures that would have annihilated lesser species. The galaxy had thought exile would break them. Instead, it had made them something far worse than they had ever been before. "Captain," called Navigator Alexis Kane from her station, "we're receiving transmission from Lunar Station. They want us to identify ourselves." The bridge fell silent. In the viewport, the moon hung like a pale eye, its surface dotted with the gleaming domes of Zephythus architecture. Where once the Luna colonies had been humanity's proudest achievement, now stood monuments to their replacements. "Open a channel," Voss commanded, her voice carrying the kind of quiet menace that made veteran warriors take a step back. The holographic display shimmered to life, revealing the ethereal form of Station Commander Yuthalon. The Zephythus being's crystalline features flickered between translucent hues as it spoke in the melodic tones of its species. "Unknown vessels, you are approaching restricted space. Identify your purpose and submit to immediate inspection, or you will be—" The transmission cut to static. "Interesting," murmured Chief Engineer David Cross, his fingers dancing across haptic controls that would have overwhelmed any other species' nervous system. "Their jamming technology has improved. Not enough, but interesting." "How long until we reach orbital insertion?" Voss asked. 14 hours, 17 minutes, Kane replied automatically. "Fleet disposition shows all 97 ships maintaining formation. The Revelation and Retribution are reporting full weapon systems online." Voss nodded slowly, watching Earth turn beneath them like a jewel that had been stolen and finally reclaimed. 300 years ago, humanity had made a mistake. They had been too trusting, too eager to join the galactic community. When the Council had declared them incompatible with civilized space and ordered their exile, humans had gone quietly, believing their banishment would be temporary. They had learned better. "Signal the fleet," she ordered. "Begin Phase 1. 6 light-years away, on the pristine garden world of Neximeron, Empress Veltharion received the impossible news with the kind of stillness that preceded galactic catastrophes. "Repeat that," she commanded, her forearms folding in the traditional gesture of deep contemplation. The Neximerani had ruled the galactic East for 5 millennia, their wisdom legendary, their patience infinite. "The Thuth, the humans, your magnificence," stammered Communications Prime Zeth Coriel. "They have returned to their homeworld. Initial reports suggest a fleet of nearly 100 vessels, design unknown. Long-range sensors indicates significant technological advancement. Veltharian's compound eyes shifted to regard the star map hovering above the command center. Earth pulsed like a red warning beacon at the edge of civilized space, that quarantined world where they had locked away the galaxy's greatest monsters. "This cannot be," she whispered. "The exile protocols, the enforcement screens. How did they breach the containment fields?" We don't know, Your Magnificence." A chill ran through the Empress that had nothing to do with temperature. The Nexamarani possessed genetic memory stretching back millions of years, and embedded deep within that cellular archive lay fragments of the old warnings. Stories from the time before the exile, when humanity had first emerged from their death world and begun their terrifying expansion across local space. Before the Council had realized what they were dealing with, "Contact the Zephythis Council immediately," she ordered. And send word to the outer colonies. Tell them to prepare for—" She could not bring herself to say it. The word that had not been spoken in 3 centuries. The concept that civilized species had forgotten was even possible. War. The first engagement came at Luna. Captain Voss watched through the Prometheus's tactical display as 12 human fighters, sleek, predatory craft barely larger than shuttles, danced through the defensive grid surrounding Earth's moon. The Zephythis had constructed an impressive array of energy weapons and shield generators, turning Luna into a fortress that should have been impregnable. Against any other species, it would have been. "Deploying countermeasures," reported Weapons Officer Maria Santos, her voice steady as death. The neural crown around her temples pulsed rapidly, her enhanced reflexes coordinating attacks across multiple vectors simultaneously, targeting primary power nodes. On the display, the human fighters moved like living shadows, their adaptive camouflage rendering them nearly invisible against the starfield. Each pilot bore the genetic modifications that had kept humanity alive in the void: enhanced spatial awareness, radiation resistance, the ability to function in environments that would kill most galactic species within minutes. The Zephythis defenders opened fire, brilliant lances of coherent energy splitting the darkness. Their weapons were precise, elegant, designed by beings who viewed warfare as an unfortunate necessity to be concluded as quickly and cleanly as possible. They had never fought an enemy that considered war an art form. The human fighters scattered like startled birds, then reformed in attack patterns that defied conventional tactical doctrine. They struck from impossible angles, using Luna's own defensive infrastructure as cover, turning the moon's gravity well into a weapon. "First shield generator is down," Santos reported, initiating secondary bombardment. The Prometheus itself had not yet fired a shot, but its presence loomed over the battlefield like a storm cloud. At 3 kilometers in length, the human dreadnought was larger than most space stations, its hull bristling with weapon systems that the galaxy had never seen. "This is Station Commander Ythalon to all unknown vessels," came a transmission, the Zephythis officer's melodic voice now tight with something approaching fear. "Cease your attack immediately. We are prepared to discuss terms." "No terms," Voss replied softly. "No negotiation, no mercy." She nodded to Santos. The Prometheus main cannon fired once. The energy beam that lanced out from the human dreadnought was not the refined surgical strike favored by galactic military doctrine. It was something far more primitive and far more terrible. A weapon designed not just to destroy but to obliterate, to leave nothing behind but expanding clouds of superheated plasma. Luna Station simply ceased to exist. Where moments before there had been gleaming domes and crystalline spires, now there was only debris and the screams of emergency transmissions cutting to static. The Zephythis defenders, those few who survived the initial bombardment, began to retreat in disorder. "Lunar orbital space is clear," reported Kane. "Earth defensive grid is minimal. They weren't expecting us." Of course they weren't, Voss thought grimly. For 3 centuries, the galaxy had convinced itself that humanity was contained, controlled, safely locked away in the outer darkness where they could harm no one but themselves. The Council had built their peace on the assumption that humans were simply another savage species that could be managed, civilized, eventually integrated into galactic society. They had never understood that some species were not meant to be caged. "Signal the fleet," she commanded. "Begin orbital descent, and send a message to the Zephythis Council on all frequencies." What message, Captain? Voss smiled, and it was the kind of expression that had once made alien diplomats wake up screaming in the middle of the night. Tell them we've come home. On Zethus Prime, the emergency session of the Galactic Council convened in a state of barely controlled panic. The great chamber, normally filled with the harmonious glow of dozens of crystalline beings, now pulsed with harsh reds and violets, the colors of fear, of ancient warnings suddenly relevant again. Council Prime Nethehes floated at the center of the assembly, her form flickering between translucency and opacity as she processed data streams from across the galaxy. The reports were all the same and all impossible. The humans had returned. Worse, they had changed. Initial analysis suggests significant technological advancement, reported Defense Coordinator Zinthal, his usual calm shattered. Their vessels show no recognizable design patterns. Energy signatures are unprecedented. How many ships? Demanded Trade Minister Yilnathan, her crystalline form pulsing with agitated amber light. Current estimates range from 90 to 120 vessels. The exact count is difficult to determine. Their hulls appear to incorporate some form of adaptive stealth technology. A ripple of unease passed through the assembly. The Zephyrus had spent millennia perfecting their sensor networks, believing themselves capable of detecting any threat long before it reached their territory. What of the exile protocols? Asked Cultural Attaché Vinthilan. The containment fields should have prevented any large-scale exodus from the quarantine systems. Nethehes' form dimmed to nearly transparent, a sign of deep distress among her people. Preliminary reports suggest the containment fields were not breached. They were dismantled. From the inside, using methods we don't understand. Silence fell over the chamber like a burial shroud. Your Eminences, came a new voice from the communication array. Transmitted from the outer colonies, this is Admiral Kethvaran of the 4th Defense Fleet. I'm currently observing the human vessels from long-range surveillance position. I must report something impossible. Spiff, commanded Nethehes. The humans are not using conventional FTL drives. Their ships appear to be folding space itself, reaching velocities that should tear apart any known material, and their energy output, the power signatures we're detecting, would require the consumption of entire star systems. Another voice, this one from the far rim territories. Fortress Commander Jexthier reporting from the Endorian defense grid. Human ships have been detected at the edge of sensor range. They're not approaching through normal space. They appear to be moving through dimensions we can't even map. Council Prime Nethehes felt something she had not experienced in her 3,000-year lifespan, genuine terror. The humans had been exiled because they were dangerous. Yes, but they had still been comprehensible. A species that used violence as a tool, certainly, but still bound by the same physical laws that governed all life in the galaxy. These creatures seemed to have transcended those limitations entirely. What are their demands? She asked quietly. The communications array crackled with static, then resolved into the voice of Captain Luna Voss, broadcast on all frequencies across civilized space. This is Captain Luna Voss of the Human Reclamation Fleet. For 300 years you have held our birth world under occupation. You have rewritten our history, settled our colonies, attempted to erase our very existence from galactic memory. You were mistaken if you believed exile would weaken us. You were wrong if you thought the darkness would break us. You cannot imagine how foolish you were to assume we would simply disappear. We have returned to reclaim what was always ours. Those who resist will be destroyed. Those who submit will be allowed to live. This is your only warning. This is your only chance. Humanity has come home. The transmission ended, leaving the council chamber in absolute silence. Then slowly the alarms began to sound. In the depths of space beyond Earth's orbit, the human fleet hung like a constellation of death. Each vessel bore the scars of 3 centuries in the void. Battle damage that had been repaired with salvaged alien technology. Hull modifications that incorporated the best defensive systems from a dozen conquered species. Aboard the command ship Revelation, Fleet Admiral Jackson Stone reviewed the tactical displays with the cold satisfaction of a predator finally cornering its prey. His augmented eyes tracked the movement of Zethith's reinforcement fleets, calculating arrival times and probable engagement zones with the kind of precision that came from fighting an entire galaxy's worth of enemies. "Status report," he commanded. "Earth orbital insertion complete," reported his aide, Commander Rachel Phoenix. Like all humans in the fleet, she bore the visible marks of their evolution-enhanced musculature, redundant cardiosystems, neural implants that allowed direct interface with ship systems. Resistance has been minimal. The Zethithis garrison was unprepared. That was something of an understatement. The alien forces occupying Earth had been primarily scientific and administrative personnel, researchers studying humanity's abandoned cities and archaeologists cataloging the remnants of human civilization. They had been equipped for discovery, not defense. They had died with archaeological tools in their hands. "Civilian status?" Stone asked. "No human survivors detected planetside." The Zethiths appear to have been thorough in their preservation efforts. Stone's expression didn't change, but the temperature in the command center seemed to drop several degrees. The human fleet had hoped, though they hadn't dared to expect, that some remnant of Earth's population might have survived the occupation. That hope had been extinguished within hours of orbital insertion. Earth was empty of human life, a museum world, carefully maintained by alien curators who had turned humanity's birth world into a monument to their own enlightened mercy. "Signal the terraform stations," Stone ordered. "Begin atmospheric reprocessing. I want Earth's climate restored to pre-occupation parameters within 72 hours. "Sir, the environmental changes will be catastrophic to existing Zethithis infrastructure." "Good." Phoenix nodded, understanding perfectly. The human fleet had not returned to reclaim a world. They had returned to resurrect one. And like all resurrections, this would require a purifying fire. "Admiral," called the communications officer, "we're receiving multiple transmissions from the Galactic Core. Surrender demands. Negotiation requests, offers of tribute. The usual diplomatic overtures." Stone almost smiled. "Almost. Send a reply to all frequencies," he ordered. "Tell them we'll consider their offers of surrender once every human world has been returned to human control. Until then," he gestured to the viewport, where Earth hung like a blue pearl awaiting its rightful inheritors. "We continue the harvest." The first human boots to touch Earth's soil in 3 centuries belonged to Sergeant First Class Amanda Cross, a woman whose genetic modifications had given her the strength to crush steel and the reflexes to dodge weapons fire that moved at nearly light speed. She knelt in what had once been New York's Central Park, now carefully maintained as a pristine example of early human urban planning, according to the Zethithis information plaques. Her enhanced senses detected the subtle wrongness immediately. The air was too clean, the plant life too perfectly arranged. Even the soil had been processed, filtered, made safe, according to alien standards. They had tried to improve on perfection. "Atmospheric readings?" she called to her squad. "Oxygen content elevated by 12%, nitrogen ratios adjusted for Zethithis respiratory requirements," reported Corporal James Mitchell, his scanner sweeping across the artificially maintained landscape. "Trace elements suggest extensive terraforming. They've been editing the planet." Cross nodded grimly. It was what they had expected, what the long-range surveys had suggested. The aliens hadn't just occupied Earth, they had tried to perfect it, to make it more suitable for what they considered civilized life. They would pay for that arrogance. "Movement, northeast quadrant," called Private Lisa Storm, her rifle already tracking potential targets. The human weapons were sleek, deadly things that fired projectiles at relativistic velocities, each shot capable of punching through starship armor. Through her tactical display, Cross watched a small group of Zethithis researchers fleeing the landing zone. They moved with the flowing grace of their species, but also with the desperate speed of creatures who had suddenly realized they were no longer the apex predators in their environment. "Rules of engagement?" asked Mitchell. Cross considered this for a moment, watching the aliens disappear into the carefully maintained forest. 300 years ago, humanity would have shown mercy. They would have offered quarter-accepted surrender, attempted to find common ground with their former oppressors. 3 centuries in the void had burned such weakness out of them. "No prisoners," she said quietly. "No exceptions. The hunt began. High above, in the command center of the Prometheus, Captain Voss monitored the ground operations with the detached interest of a scientist observing an experiment. The reconquest of Earth was proceeding exactly as planned. Swift, brutal, thorough. "Captain," called her communications officer, "priority transmission from Admiral Stone, the Zephythis are requesting a parley. They're offering territorial concessions, trade agreements, formal apologies for the exile." "Apologies," Voss repeated softly. "They think this is about wounded pride." She turned to regard the tactical display where red icons marked the positions of approaching alien fleets. The galaxy was finally responding to the human return, mobilizing defense forces that hadn't seen real combat in centuries. They still didn't understand what they were facing. "Send the Admiral my recommendation," she ordered. "No negotiations until every alien presence is removed from the Sol system. No compromise until every human world is returned. No peace until they understand the true cost of what they've done. And if they refuse?" Weiss smiled, and in that expression lay the accumulated fury of 300 years of exile, of children born in the darkness between stars, of entire generations who had never seen their homeworld except in dreams and legends. "Then we show them why the galaxy feared us in the first place." Outside, Earth's sun set over a world that was human once more. But as darkness fell, new lights began to appear in the sky. The engine flares of incoming alien fleets, racing to contain a threat they had thought safely buried centuries ago. The real war was about to begin. The Nex Mirani had ruled the Eastern Spiral for 5,000 years without experiencing defeat. Their empire stretched across 47 star systems, protected by fleets that had never known the sting of genuine combat. When Empress Velfarian received word that humans had somehow escaped their exile and reclaimed Earth, her first instinct was to dismiss it as impossible. Her second instinct was to mobilize the Seventh Fleet and remind these upstart primitives why they had been exiled in the first place. Her third instinct, arriving too late as it often does with beings who have grown comfortable with absolute power, was fear. "Admiral Zorthak," commanded the Nex Mirani response from the bridge of the dreadnought Infinite Harmony. A vessel 3 times the size of any human ship and armed with weapons that could sterilize entire planets. Around him, his crew of seasoned officers, beings who had spent centuries maintaining peace through the implicit threat of overwhelming force, prepared for what they assumed would be a brief and decisive engagement. They were entering the Sol system to face fewer than 100 human vessels. They brought 2,000 ships of their own. It should have been a massacre. "Contact bearing Mark 772, announced Sensor Officer Yelthanas, her compound eyes tracking the holographic display with practiced efficiency. "Multiple signatures, by the Ancient Ones. They're enormous." Admiral Zorvak's 4 arms gestured in the ritual pattern of battle readiness as he processed the incoming data. The human ships were indeed massive. But size meant nothing in modern warfare. What mattered was technology. Coordination, the ability to project force across vast distances with surgical precision. "Fleet's disposition?" he asked. "Battle formation prime is locked and ready, Admiral. All vessels report weapons hot, shields at maximum. The humans, they don't appear to be maneuvering to engage. They're holding position around their homeworld." Zorthek's mandibles clicked in satisfaction. Excellent. The humans were choosing to make their stand in a defensive posture, probably hoping their proximity to Earth would provide some tactical advantage. They would learn the futility of such thinking when faced with the disciplined might of a true galactic power. "Open a channel to all human vessels," he commanded. "Let us offer them one final chance to surrender before we demonstrate the consequences of their defiance." The communication array crackled to life, transmitting across all frequencies toward the human fleet. For several long moments there was no response. Then, cutting through the static like a blade through silk, came a voice that would haunt Zortek's dreams for whatever remained of his life. "This is Admiral Jackson Stone of the Human Reclamation Fleet. You have entered the Sol system without permission. You have 30 seconds to reverse course and withdraw to minimum safe distance. This is your only warning." The bridge fell silent. Around the command center, Nex Mirani officers exchanged glances of disbelief. 100 human ships, facing 2,000 of the galaxy's most advanced warships, and they were issuing ultimatums. 30 seconds, repeated the human voice, And now there was something else in those words. Something that made ancient genetic memories stir uncomfortably in the depths of the next Mirani consciousness. "Admiral," whispered Commander Fextheron, his voice tight with sudden unease. "Perhaps we should attempt to establish formal diplomatic contact. There may be factors we don't understand." "Factors?" Zerthek's laugh was like breaking glass. "What factors could possibly matter against 2-to-1 odds? Open fire. All vessels. Maximum bombardment." The order went out across the fleet's command network, and 2,000 Nex Mirani warships opened fire simultaneously. The combined energy output was sufficient to crack a moon, a display of raw destructive power that should have reduced the human fleet to expanding clouds of plasma. The human ships simply weren't there anymore. Space folded. That was the only way Fleet Admiral Stone could describe it to himself as he watched the revelation phase through dimensions that didn't technically exist. Around him, the human fleet moved like ghosts through the alien bombardment, their adaptive cloaking systems rendering them invisible to conventional sensors, while their experimental drive systems allowed them to exist in multiple locations simultaneously. The technology had cost them everything to develop. Entire generations of humans had died in the research laboratories, their consciousness downloaded and merged with quantum computing arrays in pursuit of weapons that could match the galaxy's combined might. It had been worth every sacrifice. "Targeting solutions locked," reported Weapons Coordinator Diana West, her neural crown blazing with data streams, as she synchronized the attack across 97 vessels. "Enemy formation is tight, overlapping shield coverage. Recommend Alpha Strike Pattern 7. Stone nodded. Pattern 7. The tactic they had used to annihilate the Catharian hegemony. The assault formation that had broken the Valtorian Empire. It was humanity's answer to overwhelming numbers. Don't fight the enemy where they are strong. Fight them where they don't exist yet. "Execute," he ordered. The human fleet fired as one, their weapons reaching across folded space to strike targets that were still receiving the light of the bombardment they had launched moments earlier. Exotic matter projectiles, each one carrying the kinetic energy of a small asteroid, materialized inside Nex Mirani ships without troubling themselves with the inconvenience of shields or armor. The alien fleet began dying by the hundreds. Admiral Zorthek watched his perfect battle formation dissolve into chaos with the numb incomprehension of a being whose entire worldview was collapsing in real time. Ships were simply exploding. One moment they were there, weapons firing, crews reporting normal status. The next moment they were debris and radiation. "Damage report!" he screamed, his carefully maintained dignity forgotten in the face of impossible losses. 67 vessels destroyed, Admiral, came the reply from his tactical officer. "No! Wait! 71! 74! The count keeps climbing. We can't identify the source of enemy fire." On the holographic display, red icons winked out of existence with terrifying regularity. Each light represented not just a ship but a crew of 300 Nex Mirani, beings with families and histories and hopes for the future, all gone in seconds, consumed by weapons that seemed to strike from empty space. "Where are they?" Zersemp demanded. "Where are the human ships?" We don't know, sir. Sensors are detecting energy signatures but no solid targets. It's as if they're phasing in and out of normal space." The Admiral's compound eyes fixed on the tactical display, watching his mighty fleet die by degrees. In 5 minutes of combat, he had lost more ships than the Nex Mirani Empire had lost in its entire recorded history, and he still hadn't managed to land a single hit on the enemy. "Signal the fleet," he ordered, the words bitter as poison on his speaking apparatus. "Full retreat. Emergency withdrawal to rally point Nexus 7. Admiral. What about the ground forces? We have 300,000 troops deployed across 17 worlds in this sector." Zorthek closed his eyes, tasting defeat for the first time in his 1,000-year lifespan. "They're on their own." The infinite harmony turned away from Earth, leading the shattered remnants of the 7th Fleet in a desperate flight back to civilized space. Behind them, the human ships emerged from whatever impossible dimension they had been hiding in, their hulls unmarked by enemy fire. The massacre had taken 11 minutes. The psychological impact would last forever. The news of the next Mierani defeat reached Cephas Prime like a shockwave through crystalline resonance chambers. Council Prime Nethihes absorbed the impossible data streams with growing horror, her form flickering between transparency and opacity as she processed information that challenged everything the galactic civilization believed about itself. 2,000 ships. Gone. The Seventh Fleet had been the pride of the Eastern Spiral, equipped with technology that represented millennia of accumulated knowledge and experience. They had faced barely 100 human vessels and been annihilated so completely that most of their ships never even managed to transmit casualty reports. "How is this possible?" demanded Defense Coordinator Zenthal lied, his crystalline matrix pulsing with agitated crimson light. The humans were exiled with primitive technology, chemical rockets and nuclear weapons. They should not even possess faster-than-light capability. "Clearly," replied Cultural Attaché Vintalan with acid precision, "our assumptions about human technological development were flawed." Nethihes floated to the center of the chamber, her form now solid with grim determination. Around her, the greatest minds of galactic civilization struggled to comprehend what they were facing. "Summon the archive keepers," she commanded. "I want every record of pre-exile human activities, every contact report, every technological assessment, every psychological profile. Whatever these creatures have become, the seeds must have been present 3 centuries ago." The holographic displays flickered to life, calling up files that had not been accessed in living memory. Data streams flowed through the chamber like digital waterfalls, each one carrying fragments of humanity's forgotten history. What they revealed was worse than anyone had imagined. "By the ancient protocols," whispered Archive Keeper Zenthalar, his ancient form trembling as he processed records from the first human contact. They were already adapting. Even then, they were learning our technology faster than should have been possible. The recordings played across the chamber's display systems. First contact scenarios where human diplomats demonstrated an unsettling ability to master alien languages within hours. Trade negotiations where human engineers reverse-engineered galactic technology from brief examinations. Cultural exchanges where human children learned advanced physics concepts that should have taken decades to master. The signs had been there all along. "Continue," Nethihes ordered, though part of her already feared what they would discover. Military assessments from the exile period show concerning adaptability. Human soldiers incorporating captured alien weaponry into their tactical doctrine within days. Human scientists replicating advanced material synthesis from minimal samples. Human strategists developing countermeasures to Galactic Council fleet formations that had remained unchanged for millennia. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. Humanity hadn't just been exiled because they were violent. They had been exiled because they were learning, adapting, evolving at a rate that threatened the established order of galactic civilization. 300 years. Murmured Nethihes. 300 years in the void, with no constraints on their development, no treaties limiting their research, no councils monitoring their technological progress. What have they become? The answer came in the form of a priority transmission from the outer colonies. The voice belonged to Governor Hykestheron of the Kepler Mining Consortium, a Zephthis administrator who oversaw resource extraction from 47 star systems. His words were broken by static and what sounded suspiciously like weapons fire. "Council Prime, this is Governor Hykestheron. Urgent assistance required. Human ships appeared without warning. Our entire defense grid is by the ancients. They're not just destroying our ships. They're taking them apart piece by piece, studying them while they fight us, learning our weaknesses in real time." The transmission dissolved into screaming static. "How many?" Nethihes asked quietly. 47 star systems, replied Communications Prime Zevcoriel. The Kepler Consortium controlled 17% of our industrial output. And now, the humans have it. Captain Lunavos stood in the ruins of what had once been the Zephthis Council's primary research facility on Kepler 7. Watching human engineers dissect alien technology with the methodical precision of battlefield surgeons. Around her, the spoils of 3 centuries of galactic advancement were being catalogued, analyzed, and integrated into humanity's ever-growing arsenal. "Status report," she called to Chief Engineer David Cross, who was currently interfacing directly with the Zeph quantum computer array through neural implants that would have killed most organic species. "Their shielding technology is impressive," he replied without looking up from his work. "Adaptive frequency modulation. Self-repairing matrix structures. We should be able to improve our own defensive systems by at least 30% once we understand the underlying principles." "And their weapons?" Cross's smile was predatory. "Elegant, but inefficient. They've prioritized precision over raw destructive capability. Good for surgical strikes, useless against an enemy that can regenerate battle damage in real time." Voss nodded, unsurprised. The galaxy had grown soft during humanity's exile. Their military technology focused on ending conflicts quickly and cleanly, rather than grinding through prolonged campaigns. They had forgotten that some wars weren't meant to be elegant. "Captain," called intelligence officer Sarah Blake from her position at a captured communication console, "I'm intercepting transmissions from the Galactic Core. The Zephyr Council is mobilizing their reserve fleets. Looks like they're planning to make a stand at the Centauri Nexus." "How many ships?" "Current estimates suggest somewhere between 5,000 and 8,000 vessels. They're calling in favors from every allied species, pulling ships from patrol duties across the entire galactic arm." Voss considered this information with the cold calculation of a chess grandmaster planning 7 moves ahead. 8,000 ships represented nearly a quarter of the galaxy's total military capacity. If the aliens were willing to commit that many resources to stopping humanity's expansion, it meant they finally understood what they were truly facing. It also meant they were desperate. "Signal Admiral Stone," she ordered. "Tell him the galaxy is finally taking us seriously, and signal the fleet. It's time for Phase 3. Blake's fingers paused over the communication controls. "Phase 3, Captain?" "But it means we stop playing games," Voss replied quietly. "It means we show them what 300 years in hell can do to a species that refuses to die." She turned to regard the viewport, where the fires of Kepler-7's burning cities painted the alien sky in shades of orange and red. In the distance, human dropships were deploying ground forces to secure the remaining industrial facilities. The galaxy had made a mistake 3 centuries ago. They had exiled humanity believing that isolation would weaken them, that the harsh realities of life in the void would break their spirit and scatter their scattered colonies to the cosmic winds. Instead, they had given humanity exactly what they needed: freedom from the constraints of civilized warfare, time to develop weapons and tactics that the galaxy had never imagined, and most importantly, 300 years to nurture a collective fury that burned hotter than the cores of dying stars. The humans were no longer the species the galaxy had exiled. They were something far worse. The Battle of Centauri Nexus would be remembered as the moment the galaxy's golden age truly ended. Admiral Stone watched the assembled alien fleet through the Revelation's advanced sensors, counting ship signatures and analyzing formation patterns with the detached interest of an apex predator studying its prey. 8,347 vessels, representing the combined military might of 19 different species. It was, by any objective measure, the largest fleet ever assembled in galactic history. Against the 97 ships of the Human Reclamation Fleet, it should have been like bringing a nuclear weapon to fight an insect. "Fleet status?" Stone asked. "All vessels reporting ready, Admiral," replied Commander Phoenix. "Phase 3 modifications are complete. Quantum entanglement networks are synchronized. The new weapon systems are eager to be tested." Stone nodded grimly. Phase 3 represented the culmination of humanity's 3-century development program. Weapons that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, shields that drew power directly from black holes, and most terrifying of all, consciousness transfer technology that meant no human ship was ever truly destroyed as long as the crew's neural patterns could be downloaded to backup systems. They had learned to make death itself temporary. "Signal the fleet," he ordered. "Deploy the Revenants." Phoenix's expression darkened. The Revenants were humanity's ultimate weapon. Ships crewed by the downloaded consciousnesses of humans who had died during the long exile, their memories and personalities preserved in quantum matrices and given new bodies forged from exotic matter. They were the ghosts of humanity's murdered children, returned to seek vengeance on the species that had condemned them to die in the cold darkness between stars. Revenants deploying, Phoenix reported, her voice tight with emotion. Ghost Squadron is moving to attack position. On the tactical display, 12 new icons appeared. Ships that existed in a quantum superposition between life and death, crewed by beings who had transcended mortality itself. Each revenant carried the memories of hundreds of humans who had perished during the exile, their collective fury focused into weapons that could unmake matter at the subatomic level. The alien fleet, for all its size and power, had no defense against enemies who had already died once and learned to consider it merely an inconvenience. "This is Admiral Stone to all alien vessels," he broadcast across every frequency. "You have one final chance to withdraw from this system. Leave now and live. Remain and join the billions who thought they could cage humanity." The reply came from Admiral Klaxtalthorian of the Combined Defense Fleet, his voice carrying the authority of 17 different species. "This is where your expansion ends, human. Surrender now and we may show you the mercy you have refused to grant others." Stone's smile was colder than the void between galaxies. "Mercy," he repeated softly. "You want to know what happened to our capacity for mercy, Admiral? We left it buried in the mass graves on Kepler Prime. We burned it with our children on Vega Colony. We fed it to the void when your people condemned an entire species to die in exile." The pause stretched across space like a held breath. "You should have killed us all when you had the chance." The Battle of Centauri Nexus began with the Revenants. Ghost Squadron phased through the alien formation like specters of vengeance, their exotic matter hulls passing through conventional shields as if they didn't exist. Where they passed, enemy ships simply their power systems failed, their life support systems shut down, their crew members collapsed as the Revenants drained the quantum energy that held their molecular structures together. Within the first minute of combat, 300 alien vessels had become floating tombs. "Impossible," whispered Admiral Quexalthorian, watching his fleet die by the hundreds. "Our shields should protect against any known weapons technology." "Known," emphasized his tactical officer, her compound eyes wide with terror as she processed sensor data that defied comprehension. "Admiral, these humans are using weapons that exist in 11 dimensions simultaneously. Our defensive systems can only operate in 4. The main human fleet hadn't even engaged yet. Council Prime Nethias felt her crystalline matrix crack as she processed the real-time reports from Centauri Nexus. The numbers were impossible, the tactics incomprehensible, the sheer scope of human technological advancement beyond anything the galaxy had believed possible. In 23 minutes of combat, the largest military force in recorded history had been reduced to debris and expanding clouds of vaporized metal. 97 human ships had annihilated over 8,000 vessels without losing a single unit. "This cannot be happening," she whispered, her form flickering between dimensions of existence as she struggled to process the unthinkable. They were primitives, savages, with chemical rockets and crude nuclear weapons. How could they? The answer came from Archive Keeper Zenthalar, his ancient voice carrying the weight of accumulated millennia. "Because we taught them to hate us perfectly." The holographic displays showed the aftermath of the battle. Human ships moving through the debris field, their hulls somehow absorbing the wreckage of alien vessels and converting it into raw materials for construction and repair. They were growing stronger with every victory, learning from every encounter, adapting at a rate that made evolution itself seem sluggish. "The exile," Nethias breathed, understanding finally dawning like a malignant sunrise. "We didn't just banish them from civilized space. We gave them time to become something that civilized space cannot contain." "What are your orders, Council Prime?" asked Defense Coordinator Zintalad, though his voice carried no hope of meaningful resistance. Nethias stared at the tactical displays showing human ships spreading across the galaxy like a plague of steel and fire. Each world they touched was transformed, its resources converted to feed humanity's endless hunger for expansion. They weren't just conquering, they were consuming, growing stronger with every victory. "Evacuate the core worlds," she ordered quietly. "All non-essential personnel are to be relocated to the Outer Rim territories. Military assets are to be consolidated at the Galactic Archive." "Council Prime, that's essentially an admission of defeat. If we abandon the core worlds, The core worlds are already lost, Nethihes interrupted. We just haven't realized it yet. She turned to address the assembled council, her form now solid with grim resolution. Contact every species, every government, every independent colony in the galaxy. Tell them that the age of peace is over. Tell them that the humans have returned, and they have become something far worse than we ever imagined. What message should we send? Asked Communications Prime Zeticorio. The truth, Nethias replied, that we created our own destroyers. That 300 years ago we had the chance to integrate humanity into galactic society and chose instead to cage them like wild animals. Now those animals have broken free, and they remember every injustice, every slight, every child who died in the darkness because we were too afraid to share our light. She gestured to the displays showing human ships advancing on 17 different fronts, their black hulls scarred with the victories of countless battles. Prepare for the long war, and pray to whatever gods you believe in that when the humans are finished with their vengeance, they remember that mercy was once a human virtue. The transmission ended, leaving the galaxy to face the terrible knowledge that their victims had become their executioners. And somewhere in the cold depths of space, Admiral Stone smiled as he prepared to show the galaxy exactly what 3 centuries of exile had taught humanity about the price of survival. The Galactic Archive hung in space like a crystalline cathedral, its 17,000 storage bays, containing the accumulated knowledge of 47 civilizations spanning 12 million years of recorded history. It was the galaxy's memory, its cultural heart, the one place that all species agreed must be preserved regardless of political differences or territorial disputes. When the human fleet arrived at its coordinates, Admiral Stone felt something he hadn't experienced in 3 centuries. Hesitation. The archive wasn't just a repository of information, it was the closest thing the galaxy had to a soul. Every species, including humanity, had contributed to its vast collections. In those crystal matrices lay the stories of countless worlds, the art and literature and scientific discoveries that defined galactic civilization. Destroying it would be an act of cosmic vandalism that would echo through the universe long after the stars themselves had died. Fleet status? He asked, quietly studying the impossible beauty of the archive through the Revelation's sensors. All vessels in position, Admiral Commander Phoenix replied. The archive's defenses are minimal. A few hundred Guardian ships, mostly automated systems. They're broadcasting surrender offers on all frequencies. Stone nodded, unsurprised. The archive keepers had always been scholars first. Warriors never. They would fight if pressed, but their hearts weren't in it. They understood better than most what humanity had become, and what resistance would ultimately cost them. Any sign of Council Prime Nethihes. Long-range sensors detect a Zephyrus command vessel holding position near the archive's primary docking array. Energy signatures suggest it's the Eternal Wisdom flagship of the Galactic Council. Stone's augmented eyes tracked the vessel's position on the tactical display. After 300 years of planning, after conquering 17 star systems and annihilating the galaxy's combined military forces, he was finally face to face with the beings who had condemned humanity to exile. Part of him wanted to simply obliterate the entire facility and be done with it. The logical part, the part that had been shaped by centuries of warfare against impossible odds, knew that would be the tactically sound decision. But another part, the part that still remembered what humanity had been before the exile, wondered if there might be a different path. Signal the archive, he ordered. Request direct communication with Council Prime Nethihes. Phoenix's expression tightened. Admiral, the Council ordered our exile. They condemned millions of humans to die in the void. Are you certain? I'm certain that I want to look her in the eye when I decide whether to let galactic civilization survive. The communication chamber aboard the Eternal Wisdom had been designed for diplomatic conferences, its flowing architecture and harmonic resonance fields intended to promote calm discussion and rational discourse. Council Prime Nethihes floated at its center, her crystalline form reflecting the soft bioluminescence that had once symbolized the enlightened nature of galactic governance. When Admiral Stone's holographic projection materialized before her, she found herself staring at something that challenged every assumption her species had made about human nature. He looked normal, not the savage monster she had expected, not the genetically twisted abomination that 3 centuries of warfare should have produced. Just a middle-aged human male with graying hair and the kind of tired eyes that came from carrying impossible burdens. "Council Prime," he said, his voice carrying none of the fury she had anticipated. "Thank you for agreeing to this conversation, Admiral Stone." Her reply resonated through the chamber's acoustic systems. The musical tones of her species' language somehow translated into human speech patterns. "I confess, I expected something different." "You expected a monster." "Yes." Stone smiled, and in that expression she glimpsed something that terrified her more than all the weapons and warships. Humanity. After everything they had done to his species, after all the death and exile and systematic oppression, he still seemed fundamentally human. "I understand your confusion," he continued. 3 centuries of warfare should have transformed us into the very savages you claimed we were when you ordered our exile. But you made a crucial error in your calculations, Council Prime. Which was, you assumed that becoming effective killers would cost us our humanity. You never considered that we might simply become better at being human. Nethi Hess's form flickered with uncertainty. "I don't understand." Stone's projection gestured to the archive around them, its vast halls filled with the cultural treasures of 1,000 species. "What do you think humanity is, Council Prime? At its core, what defines our species?" "Violence," she replied immediately. "Aggression. The inability to coexist peacefully with others. Adaptation." Stone's correction was gentle but implacable. Humanity's defining characteristic has never been violence. It's been the ability to become whatever environment demanded. When we lived in trees, we became arboreal. When the ice came, we became hunters. When the deserts claimed our homelands, we learned to thrive in places that killed other species. His expression hardened slightly. "When you exiled us to the void, we became void dwellers. When you turned the galaxy against us, we became its perfect predator. When you made survival dependent on superior firepower and tactical flexibility, we mastered both. Then you admit—" "I admit nothing," Stone interrupted. "I state facts. You created the conditions that required us to become your destroyers. Every innovation in our weapons technology, every advancement in our tactical doctrine, every enhancement to our physical and mental capabilities, all of it was a direct response to the environment you forced us to inhabit." Nethi Hess felt her crystalline matrix resonate with something approaching despair. "Then there can be no peace between us." "That," Stone said quietly, "depends on you." On 17 different worlds across the galaxy, human forces were consolidating their hold on conquered territories. The pattern was always the same: swift orbital bombardment to eliminate military targets, followed by ground forces that moved through alien cities with the methodical precision of an occupying army. But unlike the genocidal rampage the galaxy had expected, the human occupation forces were selective. Military installations were destroyed, government centers seized, industrial facilities converted to human use, but civilian populations were largely left alone, provided they offered no resistance. Captain Voss stood in the central plaza of what had once been the Nexamirani capital, watching human engineers install new communication arrays, while alien civilians watched from the safety of their homes. The contrast with her expectations was striking. She had prepared for a war of extermination, but Admiral Stone's orders had been surprisingly specific about minimizing unnecessary casualties. "Status report," she called to her aide, Lieutenant Commander James Cross. "Planetary defense grid is fully integrated into our command network," he replied. "Industrial capacity is at 60% and rising. The local population has been cooperative. Any organized resistance, scattered guerrilla activities in the outer provinces, but nothing we can't handle. Most of the civilian leadership has agreed to work with our transitional government. They seem to understand that cooperation offers better survival prospects than rebellion." Voss nodded, though part of her remained unsettled by how easily the conquest had proceeded. After 3 centuries of building up humanity as the galaxy's ultimate enemy, she had expected more resistance. Instead, she had found populations that seemed almost relieved to be conquered by competent administrators rather than slaughtered by vengeful barbarians. "Captain," called Communications Officer Sarah Blake, "priority transmission from Admiral Stone. He's negotiating with the Galactic Council." Negotiating. Moss's voice carried surprise and something darker. I thought the plan was total victory. No compromise. No mercy. Orders are to maintain current positions and await further instructions. The Admiral is exploring alternative solutions. Voss stared out at the occupied city, watching human soldiers patrol streets lined with alien architecture that remained intact despite the conquest. For the first time since the fleet had returned to reclaim Earth, she found herself wondering if Stone might be making a mistake. The galaxy had earned destruction through 3 centuries of oppression. To offer them anything less seemed like betraying the memory of every human who had died in exile. In the Archives communication chamber, the conversation between Admiral Stone and Council Prime Nethihes had taken an unexpected turn. "You're offering us terms," she said, her crystalline form pulsing with disbelief. "After everything that has transpired, after the destruction of our fleets and the conquest of our worlds, you're willing to negotiate?" "I'm willing to consider alternatives to total annihilation," Stone replied. "But those alternatives come with conditions." "Name them." Stone's projection gestured, and the chamber's holographic displays activated, showing star maps marked with human territorial claims. First, complete withdrawal of all non-human forces from the Sol system and the 17 colonial worlds that belonged to humanity before the exile. These territories are to be recognized as sovereign human space, with no interference from galactic governments. Nethi has studied the maps with growing comprehension. The human territorial demands were extensive but not unreasonable. They were simply reclaiming what had been theirs before the exile. "Agreed," she said quietly. Second, formal acknowledgement that the exile was an act of genocide, and that the Galactic Council bears full responsibility for the deaths of approximately 14 billion humans who perished during the first century of banishment. That one hit harder. Acknowledging genocide would have profound legal and moral implications throughout the galaxy. But given the alternative, total extinction, it seemed a small price to pay. "Agreed." Third, reparations. The human fleet will retain all captured alien vessels and technological assets. Additionally, the galaxy will provide resources equivalent to 300 years of lost economic development. "The cost is negotiable," Stone interrupted. "We're not interested in bankrupting galactic civilization. We simply want compensation for what was stolen from us." Nethihes felt something approaching hope stirring within her consciousness. These terms, while harsh, were survivable. The galaxy could accept them and rebuild, wiser for the experience. "And the fourth condition?" she asked. Stone's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes suggested this was the most important item on his list. "The human species will be granted full membership in the Galactic Council, with permanent representation and veto power over any decisions affecting human interests." "You want to join us?" The question carried undertones of profound confusion. "After everything that has happened, you still want to be part of galactic society?" "Council Prime," Stone said gently. "Humanity never wanted to be your enemy. 3 centuries ago, we approached the galaxy with open hands and open hearts. We offered friendship, cooperation, cultural exchange. You responded with fear, suspicion, and ultimately exile." His projection gestured to the archive around them. "This facility contains the cultural heritage of 47 species. Art, literature, music, scientific discoveries. The best of what each civilization has contributed to the sum of galactic knowledge. Do you know what's missing from these archives?" Nethihes's form dimmed with sudden understanding. "Human contribution. 3 centuries of human culture, lost to the galaxy because you chose to view us as a threat rather than a potential partner. 300 years of scientific advancement, artistic expression, philosophical development, all absent from the record because you decided we were incompatible with civilized society." Stone's smile was sad but genuine. "We don't want to destroy galactic civilization, Council Prime. We want to improve it. We want to contribute to it. We want our children to grow up in a universe where being human isn't seen as a crime against nature." For the first time in 3 centuries, Nethihes found herself truly seeing humanity as more than just a species of dangerous primitives. In Stone's words, she glimpsed the civilization the galaxy had lost when they chose exile over integration. "These terms," she said slowly, They would require ratification by the full council. Many species will resist acknowledging their role in the exile. The political implications alone will be manageable, Stone finished. Or the alternative is that humanity continues its expansion until every alien government has been replaced with human administrators. The choice is yours. The debate that followed in the Galactic Council chambers was unlike anything in recorded history. Representatives from 47 species argued, pleaded, and threatened as they grappled with the impossible choice Stone had offered them. Some, led by the surviving Nex Mirani delegation, argued for continued resistance despite the hopeless military situation. Others, primarily the younger species who had joined galactic society after the human exile, advocated for immediate acceptance of all human demands. In the end, it was archive keeper Zenthalar who provided the perspective that tipped the balance. Honored colleagues, the ancient being addressed the assembly, I have spent the last several cycles reviewing every record of pre-exile human contact. What I discovered challenges many of our fundamental assumptions about their species. The chamber fell silent. All attention focused on the keeper of galactic memory. The humans were never the savages we portrayed them as. Yes, they were aggressive by our standards. Yes, they possessed a capacity for violence that made many species uncomfortable, but they were also curious, adaptive, and remarkably quick to form cooperative relationships with species that treated them as equals rather than threats. Holographic displays filled the chamber showing records that had been buried for 3 centuries. Human scientists working alongside Zeftis researchers, human artists collaborating with Nexamirani musicians, human philosophers engaging in complex ethical debates with the galaxy's greatest thinkers. We exiled them not because they were incompatible with civilization, but because they were evolving too quickly. They were learning our technologies, adopting our customs, integrating into our societies at a rate that threatened the established order. We feared they would eventually surpass us. The Keeper's ancient form pulsed with the weight of accumulated knowledge. Our fear was not entirely unjustified. In 3 centuries of exile, they have indeed surpassed us in every measurable category of development. But Admiral Stone's offer suggests that superiority has not cost them their capacity for cooperation. They still want to be part of something larger than themselves. Zenthalar gestured to the displays showing human forces across 17 worlds, their occupation characterized more by efficient administration than brutal oppression. If we reject these terms, we face extinction. If we accept them, we gain partners whose capabilities complement our own. The choice seems obvious. The vote, when it came, was closer than many had expected. 26 species in favor, 15 opposed, 6 abstentions. But it was enough. The signing ceremony took place aboard the Revelation, in a conference chamber hastily modified to accommodate representatives from 47 different species. Admiral Stone stood at the head of the table, no longer the conquering warlord but the first official human ambassador to galactic society in 300 years. This document, he said, holding up the treaty that would reshape the political landscape of the galaxy, represents more than just the end of a war. It represents the beginning of a new age of cooperation between species that have learned the true cost of allowing fear to govern their relationships. Council Prime Nethihes floated forward, her crystalline form flickering with complex emotions as she prepared to sign humanity back into civilization. Admiral Stone, she said quietly, I must ask, can your people truly forgive what was done to them? Can they work alongside the species that condemned them to exile? Stone considered the question with the gravity it deserved. Around him, the human command crew watched their leader grapple with the fundamental challenge that would define humanity's future relationship with the galaxy. Forgiveness, he said finally, is not the same thing as forgetting. We will never forget what the exile cost us. The lives lost, the opportunities denied, the centuries of suffering inflicted on our species. But we can choose to build something better from that pain. He gestured to the viewport, where Earth hung like a blue jewel against the starfield. 300 years ago, humanity reached out to the galaxy with hope and wonder. You responded with fear and rejection. But despite everything that followed, we're still reaching out. We're still hoping. We're still wondering what we might build together if we choose cooperation over conquest. His smile was tired but genuine. That's what makes us human, Council Prime. Not our capacity for violence. our capacity for hope even in the face of impossible circumstances. Nethi Hess extended her crystalline appendage, touching the signing stylus that would formally end the human exile and begin their integration into galactic society. "Then let us hope together," she said, and signed humanity back into the light. 6 months later, Captain Lunavos stood on the observation deck of the newly constructed Terran Embassy Station, watching the first mixed fleet exercise in galactic history. Human ships moved in formation alongside Zepthys vessels, their crews learning to coordinate tactics and share technology that had once been jealously guarded secrets. It wasn't perfect. There were still incidents, still species that viewed humanity with suspicion, still humans who carried grudges from the exile years. But it was progress. "Captain," called her aide, Commander Blake, "Admiral Stone is requesting your presence in the briefing room. Something about the Outer Rim situation." Voss nodded, though part of her remained focused on the ships outside. The galaxy was changing, adapting to the reality of human integration in ways both profound and subtle. Trade routes were being renegotiated to include human worlds. Scientific exchange programs were bringing together researchers from dozens of species, and for the first time in 3 centuries, human children were learning alien languages in preparation for careers in galactic society. It was, she reflected, what they had fought for all along, not conquest, but belonging. The briefing room was crowded with representatives from multiple species. Their attention focused on holographic displays showing the galaxy's outer rim territories. Admiral Stone stood at the center, his expression carrying the same calculated intensity she remembered from the war years. "Status report," she said, taking her seat among the mixed command staff. "We've detected unusual energy signatures from the Andromeda Transit Zone," Stone replied. "Initial analysis suggests the presence of technology that doesn't match any known galactic species." The implications were obvious to everyone in the room. If there were intelligent species beyond the Milky Way, and if they possessed technology that could cross intergalactic distances, then the recent integration of humanity into galactic society might prove to be just the first step in a much larger challenge. "Recommendations?" asked Admiral Quexelthorian, the former enemy commander now serving as liaison between the combined defense fleet and human forces. Stone's smile was the same predatory expression that had once terrified alien fleets across 17 star systems. "We investigate. Together, as partners." He gestured to the mixed crew around the table, humans and aliens working side by side, former enemies united by the prospect of facing an unknown threat. "After all," he continued, "that's what families do." Outside, the stars wheeled in their ancient courses, indifferent to the petty struggles of biological species. But in the conference room of Terran Embassy Station, representatives of 48 civilizations began planning humanity's next adventure. The galaxy had learned to fear humans as conquerors. Now it would learn to trust them as allies. And somewhere in the vast darkness between galaxies, other eyes were turning toward the Milky Way, drawn by the energy signatures of a species that had transcended its own limitations and dared to reach for the stars. The age of human exile was over. The age of human exploration had just begun.